November 22nd, 1963. A crisp autumn morning in Dallas, Texas. The sun cast long shadows across Dealey Plaza as thousands of excited citizens lined the streets, eager to catch a glimpse of their charismatic young president. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, was at the height of his popularity. His infectious smile, his vision of a new frontier, and his promise to put a man on the moon had captured the imagination of a nation. But in just a few hours, this day would become etched in the collective memory of humanity as one of the darkest moments in American history. The assassination of President Kennedy sent shockwaves across the globe, leaving a void that would be filled with questions, conspiracies, and a profound sense of what might have been. But what if that day had been different? What if the shot was never fired? What if history as we know it took a completely different turn? The story of November 22nd began long before that fateful morning. In the weeks leading up to the Dallas visit, there had been growing concerns about the political climate in Texas. Just a month earlier, United Nations Ambassador Adlai Stevenson had been attacked by right-wing protesters in Dallas. Struck with a placard and spat upon by an angry crowd, the incident had raised serious questions about the safety of high-profile political figures in the city. Despite these concerns, Kennedy was determined to make the trip. Texas was crucial for his re-election prospects in 1964, and he needed to mend fences with the state's Democratic Party, which was deeply divided between the conservative faction led by Governor John Connally and the liberal wing represented by Senator Ralph Yarborough. The morning began like any other presidential visit. Kennedy had spent the night at the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth, where he delivered a breakfast speech to the local Chamber of Commerce. The weather forecast had called for rain, but as Air Force One touched down at Dallas Love Field at 11:40 a.m., the skies had cleared, and the decision was made to keep the top down on the presidential limousine. This choice, seemingly innocent at the time, would prove to be fateful. The Secret Service, led by agents Roy Kellerman and Bill Greer, had conducted their standard security sweep, but the protocols of 1963 were far different from what we know today. Buildings along the motorcade route were not systematically checked, and the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository remained unsecured. Meanwhile, Lee Harvey Oswald, a troubled 24-year-old with a history of defection to the Soviet Union, had arrived at work that morning carrying what he claimed were curtain rods and a long package. In reality, it was a disassembled Italian Carcano rifle. Oswald's path to that 6th floor window had been a twisted journey of alienation and radicalization. Born in New Orleans in 1939, he had grown up in a broken home, moving frequently with his mother. As a teenager, he had become fascinated with Marxist ideology, reading Das Kapital and dreaming of a communist utopia. After a troubled stint in the Marines, where he was court-martialed twice, Oswald had defected to the Soviet Union in 1959, only to become disillusioned with life under communism. He returned to the United States in 1962 with his Russian wife Marina and their infant daughter, but his problems followed him. Unable to hold steady employment and increasingly paranoid about government surveillance, Oswald had attempted to assassinate retired General Edwin Walker in April 1963. When that attempt failed, his obsession with political violence only grew stronger. Our alternate history begins with a single moment of heightened awareness. As the presidential motorcade made its way through downtown Dallas, Secret Service agent Clint Hill, riding in the follow-up car, noticed something that in our timeline went unobserved. Perhaps it was a glint of metal in a 6th floor window, or maybe just an intuitive feeling that something was wrong. In this alternate reality, Agent Hill immediately radioed ahead to the lead car. Possible threat, 6th floor, book depository. Accelerate now. The response was immediate and decisive. Instead of the slow, ceremonial pace that would prove so tragic in our timeline, the presidential limousine suddenly surged forward. Secret Service agents quickly surrounded the Texas School Book Depository building. Within minutes, Lee Harvey Oswald was apprehended on the 6th floor, his rifle still unfired, his plan thwarted by the vigilance of a single agent. The would-be assassin was taken into custody quietly, without fanfare, and without changing the course of history forever. The arrest of Oswald sent ripples through the intelligence community. Under interrogation, he revealed details about his contacts with pro-Castro groups and his recent trip to Mexico City, where he had visited the Soviet and Cuban embassies. The FBI and CIA, working together in a rare moment of cooperation, quickly unraveled a web of connections that might have remained hidden if the assassination had succeeded. The investigation revealed not a vast conspiracy, but rather the actions of a deeply disturbed individual who had been radicalized by his exposure to extremist ideologies on both the left and right. The case became a watershed moment for American law enforcement, leading to improved coordination between agencies and better protocols for identifying potential threats to public officials. News of the thwarted assassination attempt spread quickly, but unlike the chaos and grief that defined our timeline, this news brought relief and renewed appreciation for the president's safety. Kennedy completed his Dallas visit, delivering his planned speech at the Trade Mart to a crowd that was now even more enthusiastic, knowing how close they had come to tragedy. In his remarks, Kennedy spoke about the importance of civil discourse and the dangers of political extremism. "We must not allow the voices of hatred and division to drown out the better angels of our nature," he said, his words taking on new meaning in light of the morning's events. The incident, while serious, was handled with the discretion typical of the era. The public learned of a security incident, but not the full details of how close the nation had come to losing its leader. The failed assassination attempt actually strengthened Kennedy's presidency in unexpected ways. The incident served as a wake-up call for the Secret Service, leading to immediate improvements in presidential security protocols. More importantly, it gave Kennedy a powerful narrative of survival and resilience that he would use effectively in the coming election campaign. The president, who had faced down the Soviet Union during the Cuban Missile Crisis, had now literally dodged a bullet, reinforcing his image as a leader who could handle any crisis with grace and determination. With the assassination attempt behind him, Kennedy entered the 1964 election campaign with unprecedented momentum. The Republican nominee, Barry Goldwater, found himself facing not just a popular incumbent, but a president who had literally survived an attempt on his life. Goldwater's conservative message, which might have resonated in different circumstances, seemed harsh and divisive compared to Kennedy's calls for unity and progress. The Arizona senator's suggestion that NATO commanders should have the authority to use tactical nuclear weapons was particularly damaging, as it played into Democratic arguments that Goldwater was too extreme to be trusted with the presidency. Kennedy's campaign in 1964 was a masterclass in political messaging. He spoke of a new dawn for America, a time when the nation would fulfill its promise of equality and justice for all. His running mate, Lyndon Johnson, proved to be an effective campaigner in the South, helping to hold together the Democratic coalition despite growing tensions over civil rights. The Kennedy-Johnson ticket emphasized their record of economic growth, their commitment to civil rights, and their steady leadership during international crises. The election results were decisive. Kennedy won in 44 states and over 60% of the popular vote, one of the largest landslides in American political history. The victory was particularly sweet because it represented a clear mandate for Kennedy's vision of America. Unlike his narrow victory in 1960, which had left questions about his legitimacy, the 1964 election gave Kennedy the political capital he needed to pursue his most ambitious goals. Kennedy's second inaugural address, delivered on January 20, 1965, was a soaring call to action that would be remembered as one of the great speeches in American political history. "Let us not be content with the progress we have made," he declared, "but let us press forward to complete the unfinished business of American democracy. Let us ensure that the promise of equality is not just a dream deferred, but a reality achieved." The speech set the tone for what would become known as the Second New Frontier, an ambitious domestic agenda that would transform American society. One of the most significant changes in this alternate timeline was Kennedy's approach to Vietnam. In our reality, Lyndon Johnson escalated American involvement, leading to a decade-long conflict that would divide the nation and claim over 58,000 American lives. But Kennedy, emboldened by his electoral mandate and freed from the political pressures that might have pushed him toward escalation, chose a different path. The president had always been skeptical of military solutions to political problems, and his experience during the Cuban Missile Crisis had reinforced his belief in the power of diplomacy and negotiation. In October 1965, Kennedy announced the complete withdrawal of American military advisors from South Vietnam, fulfilling a promise he had made in a secret National Security Action Memorandum just weeks before his would-have-been assassination. The decision was controversial, with hawks in Congress and the military establishment arguing that it would lead to communist expansion throughout Southeast Asia. General Curtis LeMay, the Air Force Chief of Staff, resigned in protest, claiming that Kennedy was abandoning our allies and inviting communist aggression. But Kennedy, drawing on his experience during the Cuban Missile Crisis, believed that diplomacy and economic aid could achieve what military force could not. He announced a massive aid package for South Vietnam, designed to strengthen the country's economy and democratic institutions. He also initiated secret negotiations with North Vietnamese leaders, offering economic incentives for a peaceful reunification of the country. The withdrawal was completed by Christmas 1965, and while South Vietnam eventually fell to the North, in 1968, the United States avoided the trauma of a prolonged war that would have claimed tens of thousands of American lives and divided the nation for a generation.